Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Business After Hours podcast. We're joined with Jared and our guest, Michael. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Doing just fine. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Thanks for coming on.
It's Friday,
What's that, Jared?
I said it's Friday,
Oh,
So
Yep.
thank goodness.
It's Friday. It's Friday.
Absolutely. Excited about the weekend. We were just talking about college football and how excited we are to have college football back.
Yep, absolutely.
One of the things we were talking about is how anybody affords to go to these college football games, though.
I don't know. I've been a UGA fan, dogs, and for even when I lived in New York, I followed college football and I followed the dogs. It just so happened that we moved to Georgia, and I found the dogs. But it's so expensive. A friend of mine lives out in Athens, and he can't go. It's so expensive.
It is.
But I watch on TV.
I temporarily live here in Michigan, and Texas comes into town for the Texas-Michigan game, and I was trying to get tickets because one, I've never been to the big house up here, the Michigan Stadium, and so why not? But it's like $500 a ticket right now, and
It's crazy. It's crazy.
like $1,500 for 2 tickets with all the fees and everything. And I'm like, how in the world can anybody afford this? It's just a
Then you got to
football.
eat. You got to eat also. Eat,
Yep.
drink, be merry. Forget it.
Right. So, well, Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Well, as I was saying before, I'm an Air Force veteran. I was in for about 9 years. I am an entrepreneur. I own pizzerias, restaurants, a graphic design studio. I worked in the mortgage industry, the law industry as a sales director. So I really get my networking experience from everything and everywhere. So I really know the intricacies of it.
All right. Well, how long ago were you in the mortgage industry?
How long ago was I
Yeah.
in? About 5 years.
Okay.
I was in there for 10, but I I got in at the last time that it broke. All of a sudden I got in 2005 and 2007. It went. I'm like, oh my God, 16%.
Right.
But you wait through it and everything. But you learn how to deal with those issues
Sure.
if you stay in.
Yep. No, and I got 20 something years of mortgage experience on my background, and the last almost 3 years been laid off from good old mortgages. So
Yeah, well, it was a tough time. Well, 3 years ago was pretty. That was at the bubble, and you take all the low hanging fruit you want, but then all of a sudden it just dried up.
right.
Everything just dried
Got
up,
it too.
and unless you had something good in place, like all of your network, then you really were hung out to dry.
Right. Yep. So you got mortgage experience, and what all did you take from that to carry on to your next career?
Well, I took. It was really funny because my brother and I took a mortgage business with just the two loan officers, and we built it up to uh, I would say 15 loan officers and 9 back office people. So I learned how to network and get clients, basically grassroots, and then besides technology and everything else. And that when I moved down to Georgia, and I became a sales director for a law firm. And being the sales director, I already knew my networking abilities. And so I was just put those in place.
Awesome.
And I was able to get customers
So
or clients.
for somebody that's just starting out and looking to network, like what do you recommend, or how does somebody start?
Well, it's funny because you have to either be an extrovert or an introvert. Okay. And for extroverts, listen, we're all extroverts. Okay. But For an introvert, it's really not as much fun. I'm saying we are all extroverts, but I say it with tongue in cheek because a lot of the podcasts that I've been on, the person goes, I'm really an introvert and I really can't deal with the people. I said, okay. So if you're just starting out, if you're an extrovert, I just want to say that. Um, there are a gazillion networking events. My first suggestion is to go and start out. You can start out small with a chamber networking event or some other small networking event. Go on the application Meetup and see what's in your area, and just go to the small networking events and get used to it. Get used to seeing people and say what not to say. Now, I go through. I wrote a book, Networking Unleashed, and I go through the stages that you should go through when you meet somebody and everything else. But for you to get to that point, if you're just a beginner, put it on your schedule, go. And just you can't do wrong. You can't harm yourself. All you can do is become better.
I
What's a
agree.
common mistake that people make in networking?
Talking. Okay. Uh, Really, they walk into a networking event and they just begin to talk and they don't shut up. Okay. So really there's a procedure. I call it procedure, but you walk up to, you walk into a networking event, and it's a big networking event, and I'd say there are 300 people and tables for networking and everything. This is before the networking begins. There's always that little bit beforehand, and you'll walk up to the table, let's say 4 or 5 people. You don't talk, you don't introduce yourself, you don't do anything. You listen. You listen for the conversation. Is this a conversation that I can give something? No, it's not. All right, I'm gonna still not say a word. I'm gonna wait for the conversation to come around. Okay, I'm going as an expert in my field, so I'm going to inject just a little bit of my common sense or my anything that has to do with my field, and you start the conversation on that way. Usually, around 2 people or so will ask you a question. If you did your job correctly and you came out with something fairly interesting, they're going to ask you about it. So the whole idea is to have them talk, have them, because you're entering the building of the rapport stage. Okay, so you're going to have that person. So Jeff, let's say you ask me a question. I'm saying, okay, Jeff, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do? And you're telling, and the more you're talking, people love to talk about themselves.
Mhm.
And your barriers now are slowly coming down because every time somebody walks into a networking environment, they have huge defensive barriers. And like, no, 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 nobody's going to get a piece of me. Those barriers are coming down, and you're saying, "Oh, that's very good." So all right. So you know what? I like what you do. I like how you do it. Tell me, Jeff, how can I be your best referral source? How can I refer people to you to make your job easier? And usually you're like, What? What do you?" So he starts to say it. And if you did your job correctly, you're going to ask me, "Well, what do you do? Can I have your card?" And then that starts the whole give and take. But the whole thing started off with you listening to the other person. And really, the most important part is here. Wait a second. See this? Okay. Take your cell phone, turn it off, put it away, and be present. Okay. Make the other person think that they are the most important person in the room. And as they're talking, you're listening. You're not hearing them and thinking about what you're going to say next. You're actually listening to them and responding to what they're saying. That gives you a whole lot more credence. It makes the other person feel so much better. And now you're going on to building a relationship and not a client.
So,
So
so how
go
did
ahead.
how did you get it? How'd you get into this, Michael? I mean, it's to promote networking and that. I mean, it's interesting.
I've been networking for 30 years. In the Air Force, I started networking. I started to publicly speak. I was in a high enough rank where I was telling people who were older than I was what to do. And that, as you know, you're walking on a very fine line. So that and owning pizzerias, restaurants, graphic design studio, that all taught me how to network differently. When I went to mortgages, well, now I really started to network. I actually created, when I was in the mortgage industry, I created two networking groups, kind of like a BNI, and one in New York, one in New Jersey, and about 30 businesses in each. And it was a weekly meeting. And each week I had different sheets, different things, and I explained to them how to network about their 30-second elevator speech, and we honed that. But your 30-second elevator speech really is 5 seconds. And you're like, wait a minute, I've always heard 30-second elevator speech, but I never heard of a 5-second elevator speech. Well, it's very simple. Your elevator speech is made to get them to ask you a question. So you're going to give 5 seconds. I help professionals network and communicate effectively and efficiently. And usually that sparks some sort of interest. Like, what do you mean communicate efficiently? Well, what do you mean network more effectively? And, that starts the conversation. And then I go into the last 20 seconds of my speech. And then that starts everything. So everything is to get them to ask you a question. But remember, you are going out like you are the expert in the field. You have to come across. So you have to be that confident person where you can ask all those questions. But don't be afraid to say, you know something? I don't know the answer to that, but let me have your contact information. I'm going to find it out and I'm going to get you that answer.
So how do you recommend, because obviously most of the conversation so far has been around networking groups. What about just networking in general and throughout life, throughout the day?
Well, a lot of these are life lessons and networking lessons. Okay. If I have a meeting with you and I'm going to go into your office and I have about 5 or 10 seconds to scan the room. Okay. Pictures, music instruments, major league, youth league, softball, baseball, anything like that. I was a little league coach for 16 years and an umpire for 3. Okay, so youth sports I can talk about. So if I see a picture of a child on the desk, because the first thing I'm going to talk to the person about is about family. Now, you remember one word when you walk into a room when you're building rapport, and that's form, FORM, family, occupation, recreation, and a message where you can be on the same level as them. So if you see a picture of a child, say, "Oh, is that your son?" "Oh, it's my grandson." Does he play sports?" "Oh, well, he does. He plays baseball." "Oh, he does. Oh, that's great. Well, I used to be a coach. So what position does he play?" And you continue the conversation on that. All of a sudden you realize, like, "Oh, we haven't even talked about business." I said, "That's all right. I'm really interested in talking about family." And then that breaks that barrier down. And listen, I'm talking about networking, but what about in life? Because these are life lessons. When you walk up to somebody, when you first walk up to somebody, you look them in the eye and you shake their hand. Okay. I don't mean shake their hand like a dead fish. I mean firmly shake their hand. Right, Army?
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. You shake their hand and you look them in the eye, and that automatically tells them A, that you're confident and you're present, you're there. Okay. And then you start everything else. Okay. So in in a grocery store, Okay. You have your ears open. Okay. What if I was in line and I was waiting to pay, and the person behind me was talking about mortgages? Okay. I was waiting for the opportune time. And I turned around and I said, well, you know something? You you shouldn't go this way. You should go that way. I didn't say that I was in mortgages. I didn't tell them about rates. I just told them the best way. Well, why do you think that? Well, I found it in my business that, you should really do it this way. What's your business? Well, I happen to be in mortgages. Well, okay. If you won't mind, I can speak with you later on. Here's my card. Give me a jingle. Very soft, very, very easy. And you never know where you're going to pick things up. So if you make it a general rule to be kind to your neighbor or anybody else, you're going out for a walk. Whenever, listen, in New York, uh, there's always that vet that was sitting in a wheelchair giving the little flowers, asking for a donation. Whereas I would always give the donation, say, just give the flower to the next person because I'm all behind you. Tunnels to Towers, that group I always give to because they are so important. So it's good to be kind, it's good to be good. And believe it or not, you'll feel better.
I think
Good.
karma's real, you know.
It is.
Uh,
What goes around
that's
comes around.
that's always what I try to think about is, is what could be the outcome from your actions.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's good information for people, just in general, obviously, like you're saying, life lessons, but also professionally. Because I mean, we in the business world, we always hear how important networking is, and networking, and you hear about it, and you see all the events and everything that happen for networking. What do you say to those that do everything? They're networking, they're taking your points, and they're not getting the outcome.
Well, that's just it. If you follow what is in my book, I have a kind of like a guide to networking. And if you were to follow everything that I say and do, all the way through, all the way up to the follow-up. Now, I've talked to you about up until the follow-up, okay? Because I've done entire breakout sessions, I've done keynote speeches just on follow-up, just on a follow-up.
Right.
Okay, so let's say everything went well, okay, and you got his business card, you talked about that something extra, and you got all your cards, and you go home or you go back to the office. Now, I've been told before many times, well, I wait till the next morning or the next day because things got a little busy, and I write an email, and that's it. I said, okay, you do that because I'm going to win. I'm going to beat you because that night I'm going to go home and write a quick email, a thank you email. Hey Jeff, how you doing? I saw you on such and such date, such and such time. We talked about your son Johnny. Sorry to hear about his ankle. Hope to talk to you soon. Thank you for meeting me, Mike. Now, I didn't say what I did for a living. I didn't say a day that we're to meet or a time. It was just a thank you email for your time. Now, the next morning, when these guys are just writing out their emails, I took out a handwritten thank you note. Yes, a thank you note. And I write, Dear Jeff, I'm sorry, Jared, I'm using Jeff as a
Uh,
example.
Right. I'm the better
I'm
one.
used to it. It's okay.
Dear,
Yeah, I'm used to.
Dear Jeff, how you
Yeah,
doing? I saw you on such date, such time. I really wanted to thank you for meeting with you. We spoke about your son. I'm sorry to hear about his ankle. I hope to have coffee with you soon. Mike, I send that out. Now, the first email, you have about a 40 or 50% chance of receiving something back. With that thank you note, I just upped it to 60 or 70%. Okay, positive or negative response. All I'm looking for is a response.
Sure.
Okay. So now let's say that the person still doesn't answer you. Well, I'm going to wait 3 or 4 days. I'm going to write them an email. Hey, Jeff, how you doing? This is Mike. I met you on such date, such time. Remember me? I spoke about Jeff. How's your son, by the way? Da da da. I was asking you about a cup of coffee. I just looked at my schedule, and Tuesday and Wednesday of next week opened up. How's that for coffee? I sign it. Now, that 70%, I just upped to about 90%. You have about a 90% chance of getting a response, positive or negative, from that email or from that conversation. And listen, if you try everything and you don't get any movement at all, then take their information, put into a drip campaign in your CRM, and just touch base with them like every other month until they tell you to stop. But let's say you get that meeting. Let's say, all right, Mike, I'll meet with you. Tuesday is good for me too. 3 o'clock is fine. I'll see you then. And we're going to meet at a bagel store. And as soon as we walk in, I'll know you from your hat. So I will just, turn around and say, hey, Jeff, how you doing? By the way, how's your son doing? Oh, well, he hurt his ankle, but it's gotten better. Thank you for asking. Da, da, da. So immediately I went back to the family, okay, because I knew that that was close to you. And then we started to talk business. After I'm talking about 5 or 10 minutes, then we slowly but surely, and I'll tell you that you'll get much more traction out of this slow burn than a quick hit. Okay. Difference between a client and a relationship. A client, you see somebody in the supermarket. Hey, Jeff, how you doing? Oh, hey, Mike, how you doing? And gone. Okay. What's a relationship? Relationship is Jeff. How you doing? Hey, your son's still playing baseball? Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I coach that. Oh, yeah, right. We talk for about 10 minutes. Our wives are getting pissed off at us, and we go. And that's the difference. And you'll notice that Jeff will always remember me because of these little interactions, as opposed to being a client.
No, that's good. That's good information.
That's it's really good. That's something I've always struggled with when networking is trying to remember people to like refer or and connect, and so it's always been a problem for me to because I feel like I need to and I want to help people connect. It's just
Well,
trying to remember.
you know what I do? I go old school, and I put everything into an Excel spreadsheet.
That's what I do.
Yeah, and I
That's what
put
I.
what they do and
That's
different
exactly
things,
what I do.
plumbing and everything else, and so I can refer them.
It
And
it
I
took me
always
it took me a while to realize that or to do that, but I started doing that, and I now I go, oh, hold on, let me go to my list,
that's right. Oh, there it.
yep.
Yep.
Oh yeah, this person, I'll connect you. So I've definitely done that, but you know, uh, I'm an Excel guy, so but some people may not be Excel people, you know what I mean? And so that's a good idea, though. I agree.
Well, when you give their name out, say, oh, Joe Schmo from the plumbing company, you have a water leak. Okay, so you have to send Joe. You have to send the plumbing company a quick little email. Hey, look, I just gave your name out to a friend. He is having a problem with his sink, and I hope he calls. Just to tell them that, and this way they keep you in mind because you're referring them, and it's a home run if the person actually calls them. Okay, because 90% of the time they're not going to call. But if they do, it's a home run.
Right.
Now, do you feel like any industry could work with networking, or is networking for every industry? I guess is basically what I'm trying to say.
Well, yes. First of all, the answer is yes, about 98%. Okay. Um, Ever since the pandemic, when everybody got on Zoom calls, everybody said, okay, this is the way we're going to communicate from this point forward. Well, that's really not the case because you need that human contact. You need that because people lost their minds. Everything is now done through Zoom. Like, well, what are you talking about? Yes, I can talk to each one of you, but I'm not going to get that human touch, that feeling. And you have to go out and get that interactivity because you don't know who else you're going to see. Okay. So back to your question, can any company use networking? And the answer is probably yes. Okay. Because it depends on, are you service oriented? Are you a product or anything? So if you're a product and it's the same as 10 other people, the same price, and it's the same thing, basically the same piece, what's going to set you apart from everybody else? You, you. And I always, I don't know if you can tell, but I always inject humor into everything that I do. Okay. So, and usually they will remember because we'll start a funny banter back and forth. And they'll remember me. And if it comes down between me and somebody else, he's like, well, you know what? I like Mike. He was a great guy. I'm going to go with him.
My problem with always using humor is that my humor comes from the army, and so some of that stuff is probably not appropriate to. And so it's like, nah, I'll just leave it alone. I'll leave it
I,
alone.
I, I know the humor you're talking about, and I too think that's funny and hysterical, but it's not for the people who are not in the service. Okay, so
Yeah.
keep it that way.
What are other ways that if people don't think that they're funny, what are some other ways that people can stand out? Obviously, they can't use humor. What are other ways that they can? What are other actions that they can use to help?
Okay, now I always say that if you're not funny or if you can't use humor, don't do it. Okay, because you can tell somebody a mile away
Oh yeah.
if they're forcing a joke. Okay, because then it's really not, the joke's not funny, but they're funny. Okay, so so I always tell everybody, if you're not funny, don't do it. And the only way to really excel is to, when I said before, be the expert in your field, come out with something that the other people probably didn't know about you or your product or your service. Okay, everybody tries to say that, oh, our customer service is the best. Oh, that's right, and everything, but the person delivering it is dry and he doesn't want to talk like this.
Yeah.
And okay, so he's got to be up. He's got to be up. He's got to be talking. He's got to be animated. Okay, yeah. Listen, I'm talking about a tissue. Okay, but I'm so animated that I like him. I'm going to buy the tissue from him, and that's how you're going to stand out.
How do introverts be more,
Ooh, there you
excitable?
Okay, well, listen, there's something extra that I have for introverts, and you're going to have Army. You have to excuse me because I'm going to use an Air Force metaphor. I'm going to use a wingman. Okay, whenever I go to a networking event or a networking function, now this wingman will be somebody you know very well, sister, brother, co-worker, or something, knows you, knows exactly what you do and how you do it. Okay, now I always say to go alone, to go to all these different, because you don't want to share it with anybody. You
Sure.
just have to want to go by yourself. But in this circumstance, you're going to go with a wingman. So you're going to walk up to the table with the person, and you're still going to do the same thing. You're still going to listen for the conversation. You're going to wait for that time to interject and say, oh, you know something? Mike knows a lot about that. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about that? So now I just brought Mike into it and he's discussing, because now with an introduction, it's a little bit easier for that introvert to discuss. So go through the same whole procedures. But now by the next table, he's getting a little bit better. I'm not saying that after the first function, everything's all right and he's no longer an introvert. Okay.
Right.
But after the second, third, or even fourth time with the wingman, they feel comfortable enough where they can try it out on their own and then it's like starting the process almost all over again because you're going to make mistakes. Okay. But you're learning and making mistakes. And really, by the time that you finish your networking, I would say after the third month, you're really going by yourself and you're really good at it. And I say always to put networking on your schedule at least every other week. Okay. Because if you don't do that and you just do it willy nilly, okay, you're not going to go.
Sure.
This came up, that came up. Look, you have it on your schedule, blocked out on your schedule, and you have to go, whether it's an after hours event or during the day. Okay, you have to do that, and it's very very important.
I
What?
agree. Go ahead.
Oh, what other ways can people network besides the events?
Well, there's a ton of ways. There's if you go on to, I think there's a program called Meetup.com where you can find all these networking events locally. But your chamber of commerce, there's after hours events, there's ribbon cuttings, there's all sorts of where you're any place where you gather people and you want to talk, that's a perfect place. Okay. So if you have a whole bunch of people going to a ball game, okay, yeah, that's great. And all of a sudden, what you do for a living will come into the conversation because you're going to say something because you are an expert in the field, you're going to say something and that's going to draw somebody's attention. Okay. So
How,
there's a number of ways to network.
how does I guess one deal with the fact that there may be another um person that does, the same thing you do or similar thing in that same networking group?
Yeah. Well, it's like outside of BNI because they only allow one industry, but a chamber of commerce. I go every week to a chamber of commerce and there are three realtors and three mortgage people. Okay. And they're all doing their own thing. But you have to, again, be yourself. Be, um, you have to be present. You have to be, if you're funny, be funny. Tell a joke. Just something to set yourself apart from everybody else. If you just go in there like a drone and you just say what you do and sit down, okay, it's not going to do it. When I go and I do, because they give you like 45 seconds in the beginning to say what you do, they hand me the microphone and I put the microphone down and I speak loudly and I talk. And they're like, no, you can use the microphone. I said, yeah, I know, I don't need it. Okay. And I changed the inflections in my voice and the words and everything else that when I talk, everybody's listening.
Mm.
So that's how I set myself apart. So that's how anybody can set themselves apart.
Put the microphone down.
Yep.
A lot of simple steps that
Everything I'm talking about is common sense. Everything I'm saying is
I think it
common
just
sense.
requires action. And I think for a lot of
Yes,
people
requires
that's
action.
not
Yes, exactly.
that's that's the hardest thing. I know it was hard for me. So like with all my issues that came from the military, going to there just was not something I felt comfortable in. Just because of my anxiety, and so starting it. But you're right. The more you do it, the more just you start getting used to it.
I was a law enforcement flight chief. I had about 7 guys under me, and I started out every day by we had a roll call and everything else, and after before we cleared our weapons, I spoke with them for about 10 minutes. And it's more like a motivational talk than anything else. So that's how I started it with my guys. Okay. So, and just from there, it just kind of kept on going.
It's good.
you ever thought about starting a networking group yourself?
I started two of them already. I started one in New York, one in New Jersey. Each one had about 30 businesses in each. And I had it going for about 5 years. So and during that time, different companies came and went, but it was about 30 companies. And And I had it and I taught it. And when I moved to Georgia, they were
Mhm.
like, "Can we come with you? This isn't fair. You can't leave." And I just handed the reins off to somebody else, who was actually helping me with each one of the groups, and I bowed out. But I bet you they're still going today.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's a good legacy to leave. No, I haven't thought about starting one in Georgia.
Not yet. Not yet. I went through the uh, law firm and as a sales director, and I could have started then. I started speaking full time about a year, and I could have done it then, but I'm too busy for it.
Very.
No.
So on the speaking engagements that you do, what kind of topics do you cover in your speaking?
Really just networking and communication.
Okay.
And communication really falls in closely with networking. And I either do my talks, either the keynotes, as a combination of the two, or separate, because some of the venues uh, ask me just to do networking, and some venues just ask me to do communication with one another and with other companies and with prospective clients. But it's really those speaking engagements, they're really fun. They really are. I go all over the country, and I speak for an hour about either networking, communications, and leadership. Also, it falls in there as well. Um, but I have a great time talking, as you
What's
might
the
be able to tell.
what's the key missing piece that people have, especially when it comes to like networking, but also in business, that is a communication flaw?
Well, communication flows. They don't listen.
Okay.
They don't listen, and they don't pause after listen. I can't tell you how important that pause is after the listening. So they have to listen to the other person, listen to them so they can understand what they're saying. And because if you just answer right back, then you really weren't listening. Okay. If you pause and then answer back, then you can actually answer what they asked you.
Yeah, I think it's one thing I always tell my kids is you got to listen to understand instead of listening to respond, because I'm sure it's a problem issue with most kids, but also a lot of adults that we are already starting to drum up a response and we haven't even finished listening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the key thing right there. You just hit the nail right on the head, because you can hear them, but if you're listening to them, you listen to the whole thing that they're saying, not just the first half.
Right.
That's why the important pause is so important after they finish talking.
I can see where that would be a hard time at like a networking event, especially for somebody new, where they're going to be listening more apt to respond just because the excitement, nervousness, all that, and they just want to be able to get words out, obviously. And I think
Yeah.
that's why it was a good key piece at the very beginning of this when we were talking about just listen, talk
Yep.
less. And
And really that's the whole thing. Like you're thinking like, well, I'm going to a networking event. I should be talking, talking, talking. No, that's exactly opposite. You remember you're going to see who you can give to, not get from.
oh,
You're seeing who you can be a good referral source, what information you can give to these people. Because if you give, then you will get.
Agreed. I
yeah,
think that's the other problem with networking is sometimes you get those people that want to just sell, and it's like we're not here to sell stuff to each other. We're here to, um, and that's I kind of found that with certain networking groups, it just felt like they all bought each other, and it was just
I feel
a
that way with
Yep.
B
circle.
and I, honestly.
Oh, being I formed my two networking groups with the thought of BNI and Latip together. So I did almost the same things, but I didn't want all the BS that went along with it. And I'll tell you a funny story. One of the few networking events that I've been to here, we were sitting at a table, and a guy comes walking up to us with his business cards in hand, gave each and every one of us a business card. He goes, let me have each one of your business cards. Listen, I want to talk to you, each and every one of you. I don't want to do it right here because we won't have the time, but I'll talk to you later. I'll see you in a little bit. And he walked away, and we're all sitting here like, we're like, what? And every one of us did the same thing. We took it and threw it away. Okay, so don't walk in and hand out your business cards. First of all, remember to bring your business cards. Can't stress that enough. Okay,
Been there, done that.
remember, right? Okay, everybody's done that. Like, holy crap, I don't believe it. But you have to hand out your business cards like they're money. Okay, you're not
So,
going to hand it out to everybody because everybody doesn't want it.
so I've heard that business cards are going away, and I always felt like here in San Antonio we love business cards because everybody passed out the business card, you know. And but anybody outside of here, it always seemed like they were like, don't just don't worry about business cards. They're just gonna throw it away anyways. Yeah,
That's somebody that wants to sell you electronic business cards. Okay,
yeah,
I have
and
the
that's
electronic business card. So all I have to do is touch the other phone. They have all my contact information, and that's great. But in a networking environment with all those people, we do touch everybody's phone, and it doesn't make sense. So business cards will not go away anytime soon. Okay, so but you always remember to have them and hand them out strategically to the people that you want to hand them out to. Don't just hand them out to everybody.
So I guess on that premise, if somebody's watching and they're trying to learn, what is a good indicator of when to hand your business card to somebody and when not to?
Well, you've already you've already started building up the rapport, going all the way up to that point. You're building up the rapport. And when you tell them, how can I be a good referral source for you? They go on and they say it. They're handing you their business card. Use that as a good time to hand them yours. Okay. So now there are 5 people at that table. You talked with one person, possibly two. That's only 2 business cards, not 5 that you handed out
Okay.
to.
No, that makes sense. And what, just out of curiosity, I mean, obviously, if you're at a table of 5, why would you not want to hand out to all 5 instead of just the 2 that you talked to?
Because you didn't feel that they were in your, there's always a feeling that they could know somebody who can use your services. But that's not what you're there for. You're there to make a connection with everybody that you speak to. So you're handing out the cards who you make the connection to, and there's some ancillary cards you hand out and exchange cards, and that's fine. Okay, but as a, a major note that you want for the networking event, don't hand out your cards to everybody.
No, it's yeah, no, I mean, I've been to a few networking events myself. They weren't anything organized, but I kind of had that feeling it was a BNI and that they just wanted my business for them, and they didn't
That's
care about my business.
Well, that's it. Plus, with the BNI, with the whole referral, each day you have to hand them a referral and everything else. And I found that they were just like your brother-in-law. Listen, I'm just going to put you down as a referral, and just because I need to hand in a referral. Well, that's not a true referral. Okay, so you have to really mean it, and that's one thing I didn't like about BNI or the tip. And so any referrals that I had at my networking groups, we kept track of. And, each week on Friday, I blasted out who gave referral to who and amount of money. Now, I was in mortgages, so I didn't count my referral sources as money. Okay. Because my referral source was a $400,000 referral source, and that kind of swayed everything. And a realtor is the same thing. Okay, so I took us out of the mix, and I just did that. So I was trying to be as fair as I could, but I kept track of it.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what I always struggled with being. I was trying to again referrals, to give the referrals because
Yeah, yeah.
I,
And they were
you know,
almost, they weren't worthless. They were next to worthless.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's why I think I think people can get intimidated, obviously, by the events, just because, especially that it feels like at some of these events, it's like spotting the new fish in the sea, and they just all like pounce on you, and they're ready to
fresh blood.
and,
Yeah.
and so I can see where
Yeah.
it's a little intimidating for people to go, especially if they're not an extrovert, but they're an introvert. I could see it being extra challenging.
Well, let's say that you go to chamber events, okay, that type of networking event, and you are there constantly and you know the people who are there, and it's pretty much that way. And you see somebody new walk into that networking event and kind of like standing off by themselves. And because you've gone to so many of these, that they're either an introvert or somebody who's new and they really don't know how to break into it. You walk up to them, you introduce yourself, you ask them who they are, what they do, and see, because you know everybody in the chamber, you walk them over and introduce them at a table and let them start talking. Now, this serves two purposes. One, it gets them involved and their whole networking night begins, but they will also remember you as the person who introduced them, so that elevated where you are, where you stand in their networking field.
Sure.
Okay. I call that be the host, not the guest. And you just do that. You do that enough, and it actually feels pretty good.
Yeah. Wow, Michael. Well, these are some good tips. I like it.
Yeah,
I like it. I think this is going to be one that I think people can hopefully learn. I see your website back there, michaelaforman.com. Is that the best place for people to reach you?
That's the best place on there is a contact form. I belong to a speakers bureau because there's a link from there. All the podcasts, or most of the podcasts I've been is on there as well. But there is a contact form about what you're interested in. Send it to me. I will get back to you within 24 hours and we'll deal with it, because I do keynote speeches and I do breakout sessions, but I do workshops and one-on-one coaching. As a matter of fact, next week I'm going out to Ohio to a roofing company, which they brought me in for a workshop to actually physically teach all of their salespeople, support people, and everybody else that deals with the public how to communicate with them, how to network, and all of that as a closed environment.
No, that's good.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
good. So
Your
hopefully,
experience. Go ahead.
well, here's what I'd like for anybody to do that's watching this, that's learning anything. Just leave us a comment and let us know, like, if you have any questions for Michael. We can definitely get back with him, tag him in the comments, kind of deal. Um, and so, I mean, your insightfulness has been great. I feel like it has, because whether
Absolutely.
you're an introvert or extrovert, you kind of overcame a lot of obstacles regardless, and simple ones too, that aren't intimidating. I didn't feel, at least, that they're practical, they're simple, and like you had said kind of before, like they're kind of common sense, but and the nerves of everything, common sense kind of goes out the window.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, but these are easy enough to do.
Yeah, no, it's been good.
Great
Been good.
points.
Jared, you got anything?
No, I mean, Michael, I mean, it was great to have you on here. The info hit home for me because I went through that, especially starting out, and I struggled, honestly. And I think that, like you said, the most important thing is just getting out there and doing it. The more
Yep.
you do it, the more you
That's
do,
the number one thing.
as you get experience and you grow. And I absolutely think that that helped me, was just going out there and doing it and then growing. I was weird, awkward at first. I know, I was like in the corner, so yeah, so
Would it have made such a difference if somebody who was used to going to those network events came over to you, introduced themselves, walked you over to a table, and helped you get involved in a conversation? Wouldn't that have been so much easier for you?
absolutely, and that's what, like, I was waiting for people to come to me, and everybody's got their own group. And the problem was that I was just getting into, I'm not from San Antonio. And when I was, I was stationed here and, just stayed here. So my friendships and relationships were not really related to San Antonio. So I didn't really know a whole lot of people in San Antonio that do business, that go to networking events. So I just had to go by myself. And I was like, I don't know any of these people. It's a large room. I'm already freaking out, and so yeah.
Nope, but you did it, and it must be working. It must be working.
It's getting there.
Yep. Yeah, it's getting there. I'm trying every day. Every day is a step up. So it's just
Good.
it's a tall stairs.
Right.
Okay, good. That's right. One step at a time, you'll make it.
Right.
But getting out there and doing it, I think, is the most important thing, and the most I think to reiterate is just go out there. You'll be okay.
Yeah. Nobody bites.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, Michael, we definitely appreciate you. Best of luck to you, obviously, especially with your speaking engagement and your book. Everybody hit up michaelaforman.com. Reach out to him, network with him. I'm sure he'd be glad to hear from you.
We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Have a good day, and y'all have a great weekend.
Right.
Yes,
Take
sir.
care.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after